What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the show. My name is Adam Palmer. I am your host. This is the Hobby News Daily Morning Minute. Today is Thursday, July 10th, and on today's episode of the podcast, we are going to be talking about a Jordan that is going to be sold through Heritage Auctions. On yesterday's episode of the podcast, I talked about rookies that were taking over a lot of these sales that were happening in the football market right now. Today, we're pretty much talking about the complete opposite. It was announced that Heritage is going to be selling soon a Jordan SGC 10 gold label, which is like if you're taking the three highest grades. So if you take PSA, SGC, and BGS, that's like it's the highest grade of this card. Now, I'm not going to get into the whole conversation I've had on multiple occasions about grading being subjective. So in theory, this card, it being the best one potentially is a little subjective if, depending on your view of it. I look at the grade and I think at this point, I think that people don't care about the perception of certain grades. They only care about the grade. I think people who are into the sports card industry, they probably care about the perception of certain cards. Like I know I talked a couple weeks ago about there was a Wilt PSA 10 that was being sold, and apparently it's one of, it's a version that has had some not so good history behind it. Apparently there was maybe some trimming that went on, and the version of it is not very good. So again, these are things that I think people have opinions on that are not in the place to buy these cards, but that's regardless. There is the SGC 10 gold label. This is, if you look at between SGC, BGS, and PSA, it's the highest grade you can get of all of those, or it's the highest grade of that specific card, the 1986 Fleer. There are 327 PSA 10s. That is up like about 10 or so from a couple years ago, but like this is the Jordan Fleer is the type of card where it's like it's almost impossible, I think, nowadays for you to get a 10 on that type of card, because or unless you're buying a bunch of 9s, there's maybe a chance that you can grade a 10, but I think the card is so old and the chances of there being any raw 10s left is not very high. Obviously there has been an increase in that population, but I just think overall it's going to be hard. It's going to be harder to find a PSA 10 of that card than it would be of like any type of like modern card, obviously, because modern cards were produced much better. The Fleer, that set is notoriously kind of flimsy, like the cards themselves, like the card stock. But so out of you've got the BGS 10 black label, you got the BGS 10. There are some BGS 10s pristines. I believe there was 6 last time that I was checking when I was doing some research on this card earlier today. There's 6 BGS 10s, no black label. So the BGS 10 versus the black label, that's going to be like one of the grades didn't get a 10, which still BGS 10 means that 3 of the grades were 10. And I believe the one was a 9.5, which I don't think it could be a 9, because I think the way that BGS does it, if it was a 9, it would get the lowest grade, or the 9 would bring it down to below what they would need to give it a 10. But none of them are above the black label. So this 10 it's a one of one essentially, and it is the gold SGC 10. And we've seen SGC 10s come in, like I believe there was a 1952 mantle that I think is the record, if I'm not mistaken. That was a BGS 10, SGC 10, and that sold for like $12 million, I believe. I may be getting that number wrong or getting the card wrong, but I think that the SGC 10, in that type of, and maybe the mantle is not a great example necessarily because it's such another prestigious card. I mean, the mantle 52 and the Jordan 86. I mean, they're both on sort of what I would consider the Mount Rushmore of cards. Like if we're rating, best cards of all time. But if we get back to, like I said, the perception of this card is it is a 10 Gold Label. I have seen people, when Heritage put out their announcement that they were going to be selling this card, I did see that some people were saying they saw some issues with the corners. People who are, I don't know, not graders necessarily, but they're the people online who have the opinions about the card saw that there was maybe a little bit of an issue with one of the corners, so maybe it's not worth it. But ultimately, this is going to go to auction. They're not going to put in the auction. The corners has a little bit of white on it, which I think is the issue that I saw. They're going to say this is a BGS 10 Black Label. It is the highest grade of the card. Gold label, SGC 10 Gold Label. I got those BGS SGC mixed up there. But this is going to be the biggest card. This is going to be the highest grade of this card ever sold. And we go back to, I think it was 2021. There was one of the PSA 10s sold for like $800,000. I, in my opinion, thought at one point this could be $1 million card, and maybe that was my thought process when I was just looking at the market in general, and I thought that this was like the best card, similar to the Charizard Shadowless first edition PSA 10. I thought at some point that could be $1 million card. I have backed off of that take a little bit. I think with 300 of them available, if this was the Gretzky, like how the Gretzky O-Pee-Chee PSA 10, there's only 2 of them. That one I think is $1 million card for sure. But the Jordan, with there being 3 of them, I don't see it getting to $1 million anytime soon. Like for a PSA 10. Now, does this card sell for $1 million? I still probably don't think so. I mean, the Jordans, they are not, they have seen ups and downs throughout the history of the last few years with their selling. Do I think that this could be $1 million? I guess time will tell. I think it definitely could be, but I think realistically it's probably in the $500,000 to $700,000 range, or the $500,000 to $750,000, just because of the grade, and because I think somebody who is willing to buy it is, they are going to be the type of person who, again, isn't afraid of the perception that maybe the card doesn't deserve the grade. They're going to buy the card because they think it deserves, because they see the grade. It's people maybe making their thoughts and opinions on things where they wouldn't be in the position to maybe buy that type of card. Like, and then maybe that's me, the pot calling the kettle black potentially, because I'm not in a position, I'm making my opinion known on the card. But I think overall it is like a really nice card. And I think if you're looking for a Jordan, Fleer, it's probably one of the best. And now, granted, even if you think hypothetically it's not worth what the 10 Gold Label will put on this card, it's still going to be one of the nicer cards. Like, even if it's hypothetically even if it's like just a 10, let's just say it's hypothetically just a SGC 10. I still think that holds a pretty big that still holds some weight, I think, in my opinion. But overall, this card is going to be sold. I don't think the people who are buying it are not going to really sit there and be like, it doesn't deserve a 10 or it doesn't deserve the Gold Label. They're going to be happy to buy the card because it's one of the nicer Jordans. And I think ultimately, maybe the regrading and the conversation about certain grades on cards will be had in the future. I thought it actually was going to happen sooner, if I'm going to be completely honest, with with the level of the spectrum between like what is a 10 and what is a 9 for PSA. I thought that, Mike Baker authentication, for example, is one way that I thought that more people were going to do this. I even think that PSA eventually will launch their own like regrading, where you can send a PSA 10 and they can either get recertified or some sort of thing. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if that happens, just because also PSA is, they're making a lot of changes every single day, and they're adding a lot of stuff to their resume, and they're adding stuff. So to add a service like that, in my opinion, makes a lot of sense, because it adds more weight to their grades. And it makes, and I don't know if PSA would ever add like an extra layer on top of a PSA 10. But I think that if you were to get something regraded, or they were to grade the grade, I don't know if that makes sense, but like if they were to do something like that, to me, that does make a lot of sense.